Hello and welcome everybody to a discussion for the decades, 1950 to present. What were the best-selling pro-line clubs by decade? I was thinking about this as we talk with friends, and some of them are brand new to golf, and so they're just like, well, what's a good brand? I don't know. And so we tell them at the making of this video, the big four, okay? People argue there's more, but there's Ping, there's Callaway, there's TaylorMade, and there's Titleist. Okay, just huge golf companies. Yes, there's also Cobra. This is the big five. You guys can figure that out. So, that kind of leads to the discussion. Well, has it changed in the last 20 years? What about the last 50 years? What about the last 70 years? So in the 50s, to no one's surprise, kind of three big companies. There was Spalding, McGregor, and Wilson. Hindsight looking back, I would say McGregor, here's an M09 LFF, massive deep face driver, was, in my opinion, the dominant one. They made really desirable irons. Yes, Hogan started coming out with some really nice irons in the late 50s, but McGregor seemed to dominate that space. Moving to the 60s, it was kind of the same thing. It was Wilson, McGregor. I would say McGregor edged out. Well, in my opinion, it feels like McGregor edged out Wilson in the 60s as well. Obviously some beautiful Hogan irons coming out in the 60s, but I don't think as far as like market share, just like sheer volume of pro line clubs being moved, that they could keep up with McGregor or Wilson. Let me know if you feel like Wilson is the dominant brand in the 60s. I'm curious to know. The 70s, it gets, I think a little more competitive because by the late 70s, Wilson is making some really great irons, in my opinion. But McGregor just has such a huge market share of all the clubs I see out there. It just seems like McGregor's still dominating in the 70s. In the 80s, now, the 80s where things kind of start to shift. And I think it's just the start. But again, if you have some good information, let us know in the comments below. So in the 80s, you still have Wilson and McGregor who are just dominating. Jack Nicklaus and his victory at the Masters in 1986 really propelled McGregor's sales, okay, pro line sales. But other things were emerging, so let's talk a little bit about some of them. One of them, let's face it, Ping was gaining huge chunks of market share in the 80s with their Ping I2. Just huge, just accelerating more than, in my opinion, more than any other company in the 80s. You could argue TaylorMade with its Pittsburgh Persimmon. So TaylorMade and Ping really start their ascent in the 80s, in my estimations, okay? But McGregor, with Jack Nicklaus, still seemed to be the big brand. Now, I like the 90s, because to me, the 90s is, kind of, the 80s was kind of the harbinger, the harbinger of like things to come. And the 90s were exciting. So let's talk first Callaway. Callaway really started to make its ascent right at 1991. This is actually the Great Big Bertha, but they came out with the Big Bertha, and then in 95 they came out with the Great Big Bertha. Titanium and Callaway, was really dominant, especially in the driver space. The other brand that many would recognize just by looking at this, TaylorMade. TaylorMade really established themselves in the 90s instead of just sticking with, maybe they had some flops with the mid-size drivers and stuff. But by the late 90s, TaylorMade was a very dominant force, if not the dominant force. However, Callaway, with their Big Bertha brand, their Big Bertha irons, with their Hawkeye irons, by the late 90s, they were very, very competitive. Titleist had really, established as well. Now, I'm not saying they were the best or my favorite. I'm just talking about how much volume of clubs they sold. For example, Mizuno in the 90s was making some of the most beautiful clubs I've ever seen in my life. Mizuno is just still to this day, just at the top of their game. So I talk to caddies here in Wisconsin. They say in the 80s, they saw nothing but Hogan irons. Then I asked them about, what about the Ping I2? And they're like, yeah, well, I mean, aside from the Ping I2. So, it's kind of one of those, like, who really was, dominant. So, in my opinion, the big four are kind of established now, but which I said earlier, Ping, TaylorMade, Callaway, and Titleist. But to me, it feels like Callaway kind of edged out everybody else. And then by the 2000s, remember you had the Ping G2. Callaway seemed to kind of be struggling with some of their 2000s clubs. Like here's a Great Big Bertha 2. Pretty popular, but maybe not as popular, because I knew people personally who were shopping the 580XD versus the Great Big Bertha 2, and they were going with the TaylorMade. So from my opinion, yes, the big four are really present. I mean, Titleist, 905. I mean, Titleist had some amazing things right in the late 90s, early in the 2000s. So the big four are really dominant, but it seems like to me with their, do I have one here? With the R7 driver. Yeah, the R7 driver, the R7 irons, the RAC irons, where you could see the weights in the back like you can here in this driver. TaylorMade seemed to dominate the 2000s. Yes, there were other companies like Nike. Nike started coming out with clubs. Here's a Covert 2.0, I think. This is just a Covert. Anyway, Nike was also here, but I don't know if they were like gaining huge chunks. Oh, this is just the Covert 2.0. So I don't know if they were gaining huge chunks. Oh, this might be a 2010. This is a 2010s. Let's talk about that. So it seemed like TaylorMade dominated the 2000s. The 2010s, Nike's on the scene. But they never seem to catch up to the big brands of Titleist with like their, Titleist started off the decade with the 910 with the adjustable necks. So did with the R9 from TaylorMade, right? So adjustable necks were into play. We had the modern driver, big four established. But who dominated? Who was the number one seller? It would probably be pretty close. It seems like TaylorMade wins that too, because you think about the M2, the M1, the M2, the M3, the M4. There's so many dominant TaylorMade drivers in the 2010s. To me, again, it just feels like TaylorMade really won out, and Tiger Woods coming on to their pro line or their pro staff. And, in the 2020s, where are we going to end up? We still have the big four. We have other competitors who are competing. Cobra has made a huge splash for themselves, but still, is it the big five now instead of the big four? TaylorMade has this full carbon design, which I don't like, and people I know, not everybody really likes, but some people think it's okay. Where are we at? Ping gets some love. Callaway, seems to be doing about the same. Titleist might be taking over as like one of the top brands, but I don't know by sheer volume. So, I don't know what the 2020s hold. I'm interested to see where the golf world goes, because it seems like we're getting to another stage where we're going to see a shift. And I wonder what that shift will be. I just don't know. We have another 5 years before we can decide who's dominant in the 2020s. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. These are just my opinions, my perceptions of things. Like, I'm exposed to a lot of clubs here. And, I just don't, speaking of pretty modern, this is a 2021 Ping G410 driver. Look at this shaft. It's kind of a bling shaft. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Am I way off? I didn't mention a lot of brands because I was trying to focus on the top one. So what did I miss? What do you guys think? And what will be, the big question is, what will be the big number one seller, dominant brand in the 2020s? For the first time in a couple of decades, it might not be TaylorMade, but it might be. I'm interested to find out. As usual, huge shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate my patrons. It's just general support. It just supports this channel. All the funds, $1 a month, goes to help this channel, and it really means a lot to me, financially and psychologically, just keeping this channel alive. Another way to support this channel is by visiting my Amazon shop. I'll put a link in the description below. I am an Amazon associate. I make proceeds from qualifying purchases. If you enjoy this content, please subscribe. Thank you for watching. I am the Vintage Golfer.